Vienna flickers in gold. Carriages crunch over cobblestones as they pull up beneath the vast arches of the Hofburg. Inside, mirrors catch the glow of chandeliers, uniforms shimmer with medals, and every wall seems to drip with gilt frames and embroidered silk. Musicians play in some distant hall. Servants glide past portraits of men and women in crowns and armor, all sharing the same long, sharp face. This is not just a royal court. This is the headquarters of a dynasty. For centuries, one name sat at the center of this world: Habsburg. They ruled emperors, kings, dukes, and archdukes. They presided over the Holy Roman Empire, Spain and its American colonies, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, and half of Italy. Silver from the Andes, grain from the Hungarian plain, taxes from Dutch merchants, tolls from Alpine passes. All of it, in one way or another, could be traced back to their decisions. But this family did not start as the overlords of half of Europe. They began with a small castle on a hill. In what is now northern Switzerland, sometime in the 11th century, a local noble named Radbot built a stone stronghold on a hill called Wilpelsberg. The castle took the name Habsburg. His descendants took it as theirs too, von Habsburg. For a long time, they were just one more clan of minor counts in the crowded world of German-speaking nobility, jockeying for advantage through alliances, skirmishes, and shrewd marriages. Their fortunes changed in the 13th century. In 1273, a Habsburg named Rudolf was elected King of the Romans, the title given to the man chosen to become Holy Roman Emperor. The election was a surprise. More famous dynasties had been expected to win. But Rudolf was competent, well-connected, and, perhaps most crucially, the political map had a hole in it. The powerful Babenberg family, which had ruled Austria, had died out. Their lands were contested. Rudolf defeated one of the main claimants, Ottokar II of Bohemia, and secured Austria, Styria, and neighboring territories for his house. With that, the Habsburg center of gravity shifted east toward the Danube. From then on, they were not just Swiss counts. They were the House of Austria. They still weren't destined to dominate the continent. There were plenty of other ambitious dynasties in Central and Western Europe. What set the Habsburgs apart was the way they leaned into one particular strategy and turned it into an art form. They married. Later writers would compress their approach into a neat little Latin phrase: Bella gerant ali to Felix Austria nube. Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. It wasn't that the Habsburgs avoided war. They fought plenty. But they understood that a well-placed wedding could sometimes accomplish what a dozen campaigns could not. The real architect of this strategy was Maximilian the Fürk, a Habsburg who lived at the turn of the 16th century. Maximilian himself married well. His wife, Mary of Burgundy, was the heiress to a cluster of wealthy territories, including the Low Countries and parts of eastern France. Through her, the Habsburgs gained cities like Bruges, Ghent, and Antwerp, commercial hubs plugged into trade networks stretching from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. That Burgundy inheritance meant not just land, but serious money. Maximilian then turned to the next generation. He arranged for his son Philip to marry Joanna, daughter of the famous Catholic monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. This was no simple dynastic pairing. Spain was in the process of becoming a unified power, had just finished expelling Muslim rule from Granada, and was funding voyages across the Atlantic. The marriage between Philip and Joanna created a bridge between Habsburg Austria, Burgundian trading power, and Spain's rising imperial ambitions. From this tangle of crowns and claims, one man emerged carrying all of them at once: Charles. Born in 1500, Charles grew up speaking multiple languages and inheriting multiple thrones. From his Burgundian side, he got the Low Countries. From his Spanish side, he got Castile, Aragon, and soon control over territories in Italy and the New World. From his Habsburg side, he took over Austria and, after a carefully managed election, the title of Holy Roman Emperor. By his mid-20s, Charles V ruled a patchwork so vast that contemporary observers talked about an empire on which the sun never sets. In Europe, he was King of Spain, Archduke of Austria, Duke of Burgundy, Lord of the Netherlands, and head of the Holy Roman Empire. Overseas, conquistadors were claiming and plundering lands in the Americas under his banners. All of this made the Habsburgs look unimaginably wealthy. Silver and gold began to stream from mines in the Americas, especially the great silver mountain of Potosí in present-day Bolivia and the mines of Mexico. Ships carried bullion across the Atlantic to Seville. From there, it flowed into royal coffers, into merchant hands, into the vaults of bankers in places like Genoa and Augsburg. Meanwhile, within Europe, taxes, tolls, and feudal dues came in from Spanish peasants, Flemish cloth merchants, German princes, Italian city-states, and more. Habsburg territories included rich farmland, profitable towns, and valuable mineral resources. The family wasn't just rich the way a noble landlord is rich. They were at the center of multiple overlapping economic systems. And yet, even for Charles V, money was never simple. Running an empire is spectacularly expensive. Charles was constantly at war, against France, against the expanding Ottoman Empire, against Protestant princes in Germany, and against rebellions in his own territories. He had to pay mercenary armies, build and maintain fortresses, fund fleets, and keep up appearances as the leading Catholic monarch in a divided Christendom. American silver helped cover the bills, but also created inflation. Prices rose. Fixed incomes, including some taxes, did not. Spanish society grew addicted to bullion, while farming and manufacturing lagged. Charles relied heavily on loans from big banking houses, pawning future revenues to pay for present wars. By the 1550s, exhausted and aging, Charles did something few rulers of his stature had done. He stepped back. In a carefully staged process, he abdicated and split his inheritance. Spain, the Low Countries, and the overseas empire went to his son, Philip II. Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, and the imperial title went to his brother, Ferdinand. From then on, there were two main Habsburg lines, Spanish and Austrian. The Spanish Habsburgs sat atop a global empire. They controlled the flow of American silver, governed vast territories in Europe and the Americas, and faced a constant stream of military and political challenges. Philip II built the austere palace monastery of El Escorial as a symbol of his authority and faith. Spanish galleons plied the oceans, carrying goods and treasure between Europe, the Americas, and Asia. On paper, the Spanish branch was swimming in wealth. In practice, they lurched from one financial crisis to another. Wars in the Netherlands, campaigns against the Ottomans and North African powers, the disastrous armada sent against England, and interventions in Italian and German affairs drained the treasury. The Crown declared formal bankruptcies more than once, restructuring its debts with the very bankers who had financed its projects. Rich, here, meant commanding immense resources, not having a steady surplus. The Austrian Habsburgs, meanwhile, focused on Central and Eastern Europe. They ruled Austria itself, Bohemia, and, after hard-fought struggles, much of Hungary. As Holy Roman Emperors, they wielded prestige across German lands, even if their legal power over each prince was limited. Over time, they acquired territories in northern Italy and, through partitions and treaties, slices of Poland and other borderlands. Their income came from a mix of crown estates, mining revenues, urban taxes, and feudal obligations. Bohemia had significant silver resources. Hungary and the Danube Plain gave grain and livestock. The Alpine regions provided tolls and strategic passes. Habsburg emperors based in Vienna used that base to build up court culture, palaces, ceremonial buildings, patronage of music and art. By the 17th century, Habsburg wealth had a new problem: religion and rebellion. The 30 Years' War, which began in 1618 as a dispute in Bohemia and exploded into a continent-wide struggle, devastated German lands and ruined countless local economies. The Habsburgs fought to keep their grip on Bohemia, push back Protestant forces, and maintain their Catholic identity. They held on to their core, but the dream of a fully Habsburg-dominated Germany crumbled. The costs were enormous. In Spain, the 17th century was a slow descent. Military setbacks, revolts in places like Catalonia and Portugal, and economic stagnation. By 1700, the Spanish Habsburg line came to an end when the childless and chronically ill Charles II died, leaving a disputed succession and a dangerously confused will. The War of the Spanish Succession followed. Various European powers fought over who would inherit Spain and its empire. In the end, the Habsburgs lost the Spanish throne to a French Bourbon prince, though the Austrian branch received territories in Italy and the Low Countries as compensation. After this, when people said Habsburg, they mostly meant the Austrian line. In the 18th century, rulers like Maria Theresa and her son Joseph II tried to modernize their realm. They tightened control over their diverse lands, reformed taxation, invested in administration, and pushed for some degree of legal and educational standardization. They still possessed a broad swath of Central Europe, including what is now Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, parts of Romania, northern Italy, and bits of Poland and the Balkans. The wealth of the family and of their state rested on this vast territory. They were major landowners personally, with extensive crown estates. At the same time, state revenues were increasingly tied to trade, customs, and early industrial activity. Vienna grew into a sophisticated capital, full of Baroque palaces, theatres, and eventually coffee houses and grand boulevards. In the 19th century, after Napoleon shook Europe apart and was then defeated, the Habsburgs rebranded their holdings as the Austrian Empire. Later, after concessions to Hungarian nationalism, they turned it into the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary in 1867, sharing power, at least on paper, between Vienna and Budapest. Railroads spread through their lands. Factories appeared in cities like Vienna, Prague, and Budapest. The empire's population increased, and so did its internal tensions. Czechs, Slovaks, Romanians, Croats, Serbs, Poles, Italians, and others all had their own languages, elites, and aspirations. The emperor sat atop this complex structure like a landlord trying to keep a very large, very diverse estate from falling apart. By the time Franz Joseph had been on the throne for decades, the Habsburgs' wealth was less about globe-trotting silver fleets and more about the steady extraction of taxes and rents from some 50 million subjects. The emperor had a personal fortune, palaces, and hunting preserves. The family as a whole had significant private assets. But most of what people thought of as Habsburg wealth was embodied in the machinery of the state they controlled. Then, one gunshot changed everything. In 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Bosnian Serb nationalist. Austria-Hungary's response triggered a chain reaction in the alliance system. Within weeks, what might have been a regional crisis had turned into the First World War. 4 years later, after enormous losses and internal collapse, Austria-Hungary disintegrated. New nation-states emerged: Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, later Yugoslavia, along with enlarged Romania and Poland. The Habsburg monarchy was finished. The new republican government in Austria passed laws stripping the Habsburgs of their political role and confiscating most of their properties. Similar processes played out in other successor states. Overnight, the family lost the vast majority of the land, forests, castles, and income streams that had underpinned their status for centuries. Some individual family members kept wealth abroad or succeeded in retaining certain estates for a time. But the age of the Habsburgs as one of Europe's richest and most powerful houses was clearly over. They went from ruling emperors to private citizens in exile, occasionally courted for nostalgia or political symbolism, but never again holding true imperial power. So, were the Habsburgs really Europe's richest imperial house? If you look at the long arc of history, it's hard to find another European dynasty that combined as much territorial reach, as many crowns, and as sustained a grip on power. For roughly 500 years, there was almost always a Habsburg near the top of European politics, controlling vast lands and the resources that came with them. But it's important to remember what rich meant in their world. It wasn't a stock portfolio. It was the authority to tax, to rent out land, to demand service, to control mines and toll roads and trade routes, and the ability to defend that authority with armies and alliances. Their wealth was an expression of their power. When the power went, the wealth went with it. Today, the Habsburg palaces are museums, government buildings, and tourist attractions. The double-headed eagle is a symbol in history books, not a living banner over an army. The family survives as a name and a lineage, but no longer as owners of half a continent. In that sense, the Habsburg story is a reminder. Even the richest imperial house can find that, in the end, its greatest asset was never its gold or land, but the belief that it had the right to rule. And once that belief disappears, the treasure chest empties out surprisingly fast.